The dragon stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on its horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a deer and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. People worshiped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast. And they also worshiped the beast and asked, "Who is like the beast, and who can wage war against it?" The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise its authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to blaspheme God, and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life, the Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world. Whoever has ears, let them hear. If anyone is to go into captivity they will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword they will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of God's people. Then I saw a second beast coming out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. It exercised all the authority of the first beast on its behalf and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. And it performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to the earth in full view of the people. Because of the signs it was given power to perform on behalf of the first beast, it deceived the inhabitants of the earth. It ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. The number is 666. Then I looked, and there before me was the Lamb, standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a sound from heaven like the roaring of rushing waters and like a loud peal of thunder. The sound I heard was like that of the harpists playing their harps. And they sang a new song before the throne and before the 4 living creatures and the elders. No one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. These are those who did not defile themselves with women, for they remained virgins. They follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They were purchased from among mankind and offered as first fruits to God and the Lamb. No lie was found in their mouths. They were blameless. Then I saw another angel flying in midair, and he had the eternal gospel to proclaim to those who live on the earth, to every nation, tribe, language, and people. He said in a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and the springs of water." A second angel followed and said, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, which made all the nations drink the maddening wine of her adulteries." A third angel followed them and said in a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast and its image and receives its mark on their foreheads or on their hand, they too will drink the wine of God's fury, which has been poured full strength into the cup of his wrath. They will be tormented with burning sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment will rise forever and ever, and there will be no rest or night for those who worship the beast and its image, or for anyone who receives the mark of its name. This calls for patient endurance on the part of the people of God, who keep his commands and remain faithful to Jesus. Then I heard a voice from heaven say, "Write this, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on." Yes, says the Spirit, they will rest from their labor, and from their deeds will follow them. And for their deeds will follow them. I looked, and there before me was a white cloud, and seated on the cloud was one like a son of man, with a crown of gold on his head and a sharp sickle in his hand. Then another angel came out of the temple and called in a loud voice to him who was sitting on the cloud, "Take your sickle and reap, because the time to reap has come, for the harvest of the earth is ripe." So he who was seated on the cloud swung his sickle over the earth, and the earth was harvested. Another angel came out of the temple in heaven, and he too had a sharp sickle. Still another angel who had charge of the fire came from the altar and called in a loud voice to him who had the sharp, "Take your sharp sickle and gather the clusters of grapes from the earth's vine, because its grapes are ripe." The angel swung his sickle on the earth, gathered its grapes, and threw them to the great winepress of God's wrath. They were trampled in the winepress outside the city, and blood flowed out of the press, rising as high as a horse's bridles for a distance of 1,600 stadia. The word of the Lord.
Hey, Keith, could you throw up that first slide, please? Thank you. All right, guys. Thank you for reading, Marjorie. There is so much to unpack in these two chapters that to do it all, I won't be able to do it justice. And so we are going to stay focused in chapter 13 tonight. It's one you guys are probably all familiar with. The beasts out of the sea and the earth, the number 666, a lot of scary imagery. And so that's where we're going to be putting most of our time and attention. Before we begin, I want to ask a question. Does anybody know why Bugs Bunny eats carrots? I need you to shout it out if you do.
Good for his eyes.
It's good for his eyes?
He's a rabbit.
Because he's a rabbit. That's actually wrong. Fun fact, rabbits do not eat carrots in the wild. They don't eat any root vegetable, actually. But we all think rabbits eat carrots, right? Raise your hand if you think rabbits like to eat carrots, like it's their favorite snack. Do you know why that is? Because of Bugs Bunny. The reason Bugs Bunny originally ate carrots is because in the 30s there was this movie starring Clark Gable. It was called It Happened One Night or something like that. And in that film, there was a scene where Clark Gable was leaning against a fence very nonchalantly, and he pulls out of his pocket a long raw carrot and he starts munching on it. And so they parodied that in the Looney Tunes cartoons, then it became associated with Bugs Bunny. And Bugs Bunny actually changed our culture's perception on rabbits. Everybody thinks rabbits love carrots. What happened, though, was there was a specific cultural context that Bugs Bunny was parodying. And as people forgot Clark Gable's movies, besides Gone with the Wind, we lost that cultural context and we lost what was going on as the joke. And so our society has misunderstood rabbits because we misunderstood Bugs Bunny. What I think happens with Revelations chapter 13 and 14 is we misunderstand the cultural context that these chapters were written into. And because we misunderstand the cultural context, I think we tend to misunderstand the whole book of Revelation when we read these chapters. Okay? Just keep that in mind as we go, because you're probably going to hear a lot of stuff that you haven't heard before. Everybody reads this and is expecting the Antichrist, and when is the end of the world going to come, and what do I have to do to not be marked by the mark of the beast? And fun fact, the word Antichrist is not in Revelation at all. We're going to be talking about the beast that everybody calls as the Antichrist, but he's not called that in this book. The second beast is called the false prophet later on, but we'll get to that. So as long as you're still with me, I'd like to talk about that because we get very confused and we try and figure out who's the beast, what's the mark, what do we have to do. But John tells us this is actually one of the few things in the book of Revelation that's not supposed to be a mystery, that we're actually supposed to know. Chapter 18 of verse 13, or chapter 13, verse 18. This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast. It's the number of a man. The number is 666. We're supposed to figure it out. This is not poetry. This is, here, I'm telling you something. Figure it out. But it seems we haven't. Can you do the next slide, please? If you do a Google search, it seems there's a lot of confusion about what the number of the beast actually is. These are all very popular theories about what 666 is and what it means to get the mark of the beast on your hand or forehead. Some people think it's literal tattoos, e-currency, or just electronic buying, not actually using cash. Vaccines, for some reason, vaccines are a very popular theory this year for end of the worlders. Smartphones, original sin. Seventh-day Adventists think the mark is actually anyone who goes to church on Sunday, because you're being led astray by the Catholic Church because they all go to church on Saturday. Lots of different theories and ideas. But I propose a different one, and I think it's one that John had in mind. So, can you go to the next slide? And has anybody ever heard of Roman numerals before? All right, most of us, if we went to school, had some kind of education in Roman numerals, or if you like football, you also are familiar with them. Ancient cultures, their writing system wasn't as sophisticated as ours, where they had different symbols for their numbers. Most ancient languages just used the letters that they had from their alphabets to represent numbers also. So if you see a V, that's a 5, and X is a 10. This was the same, it was true in Greek and in Hebrew as well. Fun fact, we don't get this because our Bibles are translated, and we have different symbols for our numbers. But if you were to read the book of Revelation in its original language, the whole book is written in Greek, except for the number 666. John uses the Hebrew letters for 666 in his original manuscripts. I wonder why that is. It might be because this is the math problem we're supposed to solve. If letters and numbers are actually the same symbols, this might be our equation. Let's see if we can find anything that equals 666 in Hebrew. Let's see the next slide. So up there we have the scale for what the numbers equal in Hebrew. Those are all the Hebrew letters and their numerical equivalents. And it turns out that if you take Nero Caesar, Neron Kaiser, as it would have been pronounced in the Greek, and if you add those numbers together, n plus r plus o plus n, if you total it all up, it equals 666. Guys, in like 5 minutes, we just solved 666. We did it. We can go home. We know the mystery. We don't have to be afraid. We can call it a day, right? But what is Nero Caesar? Who was he? Let's talk about that before we decide to put a bow on things. Let's go. I have another slide I want to see. So, Nero Caesar. He was one of the Roman emperors in the second generation of Christians after Jesus. And he was one of the emperors he was the first one to make the imperial cult of worshiping emperors as gods be about living emperors. He declared himself to be God while he was still living. The way that he is known and remembered is he's a tyrant, he was narcissistic, he was prone to violence and also lying to the people. He was very insecure and worried, and so he was very about self-preservation as well, about his reign. One of the stories that's most famous about Nero is that it's rumored that he actually started a fire that burned down the city of Rome. And while Rome was burning, I'm sure you might have heard this, they say Nero fiddled while Rome burned. Fiddles weren't an actual instrument, but it might have been a lyre or something. It's supposed to say that he didn't care. He had no empathy for the burning going on in his own capital, that he may or may not have been the cause and origin of. So, after the fire of Rome, everybody basically hated Nero. They didn't like him because they thought he had no compassion on his subjects. And being insecure, he needed a scapegoat to make him popular again. So, he took the Christians and he said, "See these Christians? Everybody worships me as God, but these Christians, they're the reason all this bad stuff is happening. My divine power and wrath and the wrath of the other gods that I sit with, they're angry because these Christians are breaking the law." So, thus began the greatest persecution of Christians that had been seen up to this point in history. This is a quote from Tacitus, who was a Roman historian. He wasn't Christian. He was Roman, and he has great volumes on the history of Rome. And this is what he has to say about the persecution of Christians by Nero. He said that the Christians' deaths were made farcical. Dressed up as wild animal skins, they were torn to pieces by dogs. They were crucified or made into torches to be ignited after dark. Nero provided his gardens for the spectacle, mingling with the crowds. Not only did he kill Christians, he made sport of it. It became entertainment. I think Gary talked a little bit about this last week, but one of the things that we know he did is that he would burn Christians at the stake. They talk about it right there. He would open his gardens up at night, his palace gardens, up to the public. Come, see the emperor's gardens. And the public would get to walk around for a nighttime view of the gardens while Christians were burning alive, being used as the light to provide, so that we could see where you were going through these gardens. He was a twisted, demented, evil emperor. Nero died, and a civil war broke out. Everyone thought Rome was going to end. But they came back together, and we had Domitian, who became emperor a couple years later. The thing was, some people thought Nero hadn't actually died. They thought he faked his death and was actually abroad overseas getting an army to come back and invade Rome again. This could explain the head that was wounded. The Civil War could explain the head that was wounded. All we need to know is that 666, Nero Caesar, was kind of a bad omen for any Christian who would read or hear that name. A fun fact, too, the word Nero in Latin actually translates powerful, and Caesar means king, so we had it, Nero Caesar means powerful ruler. But wait a minute. We see that the beast that John sees, that the dragon calls, what is it like? It looks like a leopard, but it has feet like a bear and a mouth like a lion. To me, it doesn't sound like those things seem to, like, how did John know it was lion's teeth, not leopard's teeth? But it seems he's referencing something here. Are we good on Zoom? I'm sorry. Okay. So, what John is referencing is actually Daniel chapter 7. Daniel was another prophet from the Old Testament who received an apocalyptic vision. And he was given this vision of 4 beasts coming out of the sea. Just like John sees 1 beast coming out of the sea, Daniel saw 4. And they were a leopard, a bear, a lion, and a monster. Okay. So what we see is actually going on. And if you add up the heads and the horns from the beasts Daniel saw, guess what? It equals 10 horns and 7 heads. What this is showing us is that John's beast is actually a combination of all the beasts Daniel saw. And what Daniel's interpretation is that it wasn't a single ruler. Those beasts weren't single kings. They were empires. They were kingdoms. And so, Nero Caesar, 666, the beast, is not just Nero. It is Rome in its entirety. Wounded by civil war, still alive. But it's more than that. Every nation, every tribe, every tongue, as we've seen earlier, needs to be redeemed by the Lamb. The beast is not one far-off antichrist we're waiting to welcome in the end of the world. The beast is any empire, nation, power structure in your life that demands the place that is reserved for only God. Okay? Any power institution in your life that demands to be worshipped as God is the beast. We can see this throughout history. If you want to flip to the next slide, please. Yeah, so here's a couple examples in history of empires that fit the beast. We have the USSR, we have Communist China, we have the Nazi Germany, we have Napoleon. All of these figures were called and thought to be Antichrist when they were ruling. Christians wondered, is this the end, or is this the Antichrist? The answer is yes, it was. It's not the end-all Antichrist, but they were a Antichrist. They were the latest incarnation of the beast, roaming around on earth with its blasphemous names, speaking boastfully against God, oppressing God's people, inviting all to worship him. Power takes different forms, but behind it all, one more tap, please. It's faceless Nero Caesar, the powerful ruler, the tyrant, the narcissist, who uses violence and deception to get his way and rule over the nations of the earth, demanding people worship it. Okay? This calls for wisdom and understanding. But this is the identity of the beast from the ocean. And the beast from the ocean can only go so far, but the dragon calls out a second beast as well. An unholy trinity that stands against God and her people as a parody, a mockery of our triune God. Can we just flip one more time? This beast might be more scary for people like us who are here in church, because this beast looks like a lamb. It has the horns of a lamb, it looks like a lamb, but its voice is that of a dragon. It speaks with the violence of Satan, with the deception, the accusations, the treachery. And this beast is any religious institution, secular or spiritual, that sets itself up to prop up the first beast, the beast from the land or from the sea. That's Domitian on the left, far left being worshipped in his temple. But on the right are all the other rulers from the first slide, and how, in different ways, they were religiousified. They were spiritualized to get people to come along and say, this is the ruler, this is the one, look at the miracles that he can do. And it deceives people away from God, trusting in the things that they can see with their own eyes instead of the things that lead them by faith. So now, I guess the important question is, okay, if we know what the number is, if we know what the beasts are, what does it mean to be marked? What does it mean to carry that on our foreheads or our arms? What do you guys think? It seems mysterious to us, to you and I, but again, we're out of the cultural context that this book was written in. We're not watching Clark Gable movies anymore. We just see Bugs Bunny. But to the audience, the Jewish audience that would have read this book, it actually would have not been so odd to hear about getting a mark on your forehead or your arm. Can you hit the slide? If it's working? Great. Has anyone seen these before? They're actually still used today. Phylacteries? Yeah. These are common tools used in religious worship that Jewish men wear on their foreheads and on their arms when they go to worship God. The reason that you wear these phylacteries is see the box on the forehead and right there above the elbow? Those boxes where you can open up and you take a little bit of scripture and you put it inside there. And so the point is that as you're walking around, whenever you look yourself in the mirror, whenever you feel it on your arm, you're reminded of that verse that you're carrying around with you. Whatever you're trying to learn or be reminded of about a truth about God, that's what you do. The most popular verse, even to this day, today, that is put inside of phylacteries is Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 9. And the reason it's the commandment Jesus said is the most important, that's the verse that says, you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, all of your soul, all of your mind, and all of your strength. And so what happens if we're replacing love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength as being what marks us on our heads and our arms? We're loving Caesar with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. It's saying that we are not putting our hope and trust and faith in God, but in empire, in the beast. Make sense? Tracking along? And so that brings us to the kind of lives we'll live if we are marked by the beast. You can do the next one. Yeah, so again, the mark of the beast defined as any power structure that replaces God in your life, that takes the place, that demands worship, that is your security, your hope, your salvation. And I don't believe that Antichrist, which is not in this book, that the beast ever will tattoo love Caesar, love Nero Caesar on your forehead or on your arm. We're not going to start wearing phylacteries and put that inside there. The point of that verse, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, isn't just about what's on the outside mark. It's hopefully changing something within you. And so the mark of the beast is not going to be an external physical object like a microchip or a vaccine or a credit card. It's going to be the fruit that your heart produces. It's the fruit that your heart produces right now. If you're living the way of the beast, if the empires that rule over you, whether it be your corporation, your nation, your job, you become and live a very self-centered life. And when things stop going your way, you start acting like Nero Caesar. Violence, deception, greed, selfishness, cruelty, hypocrisy. What you say, can we put that slide back up? Is it working? Hypocrisy. What you say doesn't matter as, what's that? Oh, thanks. Yeah, your word doesn't have to be true as long as you have the means to accomplish what you want. It's about self-preservation and looking out for yourself rather than others. And here's the facts, folks. The way of the beast, the mark of the beast, the reason people are eager to come along and worship the beast, it's because it seems like it can take care of you. It seems powerful. It takes over the whole world. Everybody's doing it. If you think about those empires and nations I showed, Hitler and Nazi Germany, Napoleon, people thought those forces were unstoppable in their day and age. But we have, 20/20 vision to look back, and we see that they were stopped. Tyranny did not rule forever. They have no power. The reason, their power is given to them from the dragon. If you were here to listen to Gary's sermon last week, we know how strong the dragon is. Not strong at all. The dragon looks scary, but that's all he has. It's an illusion, a facade. He seems frightening. But the dragon was poised when the woman was giving birth, literally right underneath her, poised to swallow her child when it was birthed. And at the last minute, it was snatched away. The dragon couldn't eat the baby. So the dragon went to heaven and tried to fight against God. God, who the dragon hates more than anyone. And God is in the throne room. He sends Michael out to take care of his business. He says, Michael, fight the dragon. I don't need to dirty my hands for this. And Michael wins. The dragon gets cast to earth. So the dragon is, PO'd. He's stomping around. I want to kill this woman. He tries to flood the whole world to drown her. And the earth itself, people, a non-breathing, non-living thing, sucks up all the water and stops the dragon's plans. The dragon is scary because it's a dragon, but at the end of the day, he has no power over you or I. Okay? Do we believe that? Do we believe that when we see strong institutions who wield power, who have the power to manipulate, to coerce, to turn people, loved ones against us, do we know that at the end of the day, they're going to lose? Because that's the truth. In Daniel 7, Daniel's vision of the beasts ends when he sees the Son of Man appear on a hillside, and the Son of Man conquers and kills the 4 beasts that came out of the sea. John's vision echoes Daniel's here, but instead of the Son of Man, the glorious, shining Son of Man, John sees the slain lamb. He's back with his 144,000 that we saw. The mark of the beast versus the seal of the lamb. The 144,000 who follow the lamb have his mark on their foreheads. And what is that mark? The name of God, the name of the lamb. In direct contrast to the name of Caesar written on the followers of the beast. The hallmark of the 144,000 is that they follow the Lamb wherever he goes. That's their main identity. They're so close to the Lamb, whatever he does, wherever he goes, they're right behind him. Sometimes that means being in the homes of those who can't care for themselves, the elderly, the poor. Sometimes it means being in the courtrooms of the beast, challenging their authority and showing them what is really true. And sometimes following the Lamb wherever he goes means you're hanging on a cross. Put that back up one more time. The same slide, yeah. Do you trust the Lamb as the sole source of your comfort, security, and hope? Do you let other things in your life take the Lamb's place? Take God's place? If you're really following the Lamb, the mark, the seal, is your life. It's the fruits of the Spirit, which is that seal, which is the name of the Father and the Son. You'll be loving. You'll be forgiving. You don't force people to do what you want them to do. You teach them. That's discipleship. You can be generous and careless with your wealth because God is the one taking care of you. You don't have to worry about where's my next meal coming from. You know that whether you eat tomorrow or not, you're still in God's hands. Selfless compassion, integrity. What you say is what you will do, even if nobody's watching. Because that's how God wants you to act. God's watching. The Lamb died. I don't want to minimize that. Jesus died, right? Amen? Jesus died. It doesn't seem like a very efficient or effective way to get things done. But what this chapter is showing us, what these 2 chapters show us, is it's actually the only way. It's the only means of power that actually exists. Empires fall, my brothers and sisters, but the Lamb is on the throne. He has been, he is to come. Amen? Amen. All right. So, I want to tell a story about, if you're sitting there thinking about, well, golly gee, Mr. Ian, I sure do want to act the way of the Lamb, but sometimes it's hard. Sometimes my job asks me to do things that I don't want to do. Sometimes my neighbors or friends tell me I should vote a certain way. Well, you don't have to fret. There was someone very close to Jesus who actually loved the way of the beast, but Jesus was patient with him and taught him. That's the Apostle Peter. Peter, he was the first disciple to correctly identify that Jesus was the Messiah. he tells him that. Jesus asks, who do you say I am? Peter says, you're the Messiah. You're the one who's going to restore God's kingdom. Amen. Good job, Peter. You're my rock. You got it right. Immediately after this conversation, Jesus says, and here's how I'm going to restore God's kingdom. I'm going to be handed over to sinners. I'm going to be beaten and crucified, and then I'm going to come back from the dead. And Peter says, no, you're not. I won't let that happen to you, God, or Jesus. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. Dragon. You're using the dragon's ways, Peter. You want to fight. You want to preserve yourself. That's not God's kingdom. That's not how it comes. This world is broken and mired in sin, and it needs someone who loves it, who will give itself for it in order to rescue it from its depravity. This world's in the clutches of the dragon, and you're fighting his ways. Even if your cause is righteous and noble, Gary said last week, if you use the dragon's methods to fight the dragon, you've joined the dragon. He wants us to do that. So the night comes for Jesus to be betrayed, and he's put in the garden, and he's praying, and the soldiers come. You can show that slide. The soldiers come, and Jesus is getting arrested, and they come to arrest him, and Peter shows up, and he brings out a sword, and he starts fighting them. He doesn't get it. He says, I'm going to protect Jesus. I won't let him get arrested. I won't let him die. Peter, put the sword away, is what Jesus has to tell him. Jesus gets carted away to be put on trial, and Peter follows. The servant girl says, aren't you one of his disciples? The man who just pulled out a sword to fight for his Lord, who won't ever let him die or be arrested. I swear to God, I don't know who that guy is. I never saw him before. Deception, self-preservation, the mark of the beast. And then Jesus dies, and he does come back. And he has a one-on-one with Peter. And you know what he does? He doesn't ream him out. He doesn't tell him, you idiot, you failed me. You let me down, Satan. No. He asks him, Peter, do you love me? Peter's ashamed. But he answers, true. You know I do, Lord. Peter, feed my sheep. Peter, if you love me, take care of my flock. This is the way of the Lamb. It's not conquering lands. It's not forcing people to believe a certain way or forcing church attendance or anything like that. It's feeding the sheep. It's caring for the flock. It's looking out for the least of these. And when our time comes, it's dying as the Lamb died, if that's what the Lord has allotted for us. It was allotted for Peter. Peter, who never wanted to see Jesus go to the cross, he died. He was crucified by Nero Caesar. But the beast did not beat Peter. Nero Caesar, 666, he didn't win against Peter. We saw Peter in this book with the martyrs crying out for justice. Peter's still alive. Nero was dead. And so all this brings us to the question, and I want this slide left up, please. What about us? I used examples from the past, but us disappeared. But what about America? I don't think we really struggle as a country with temptation to worship the beast. Do you guys? We do pretty good at keeping God in his proper place, right? And this is where it gets a little bit messy and a little bit icky, because it's reality. These are the things and temptations we're faced with. And a lot of people have a lot of simple solutions for them. A lot of people say, well, if you just act this way, if you just vote a certain way, you're on God's side. Amen, hallelujah. But that's not the truth. The truth is, anytime We have empires. Anytime we have nations that cover 50 various states, we're dealing with something that, if not the beast, has potential to become the beast. And I think America is beast-like in a lot of ways. So what do? We can look to our ancestors. It's All Saints' Day, so we can remember them and look to their example. The first century church, who was alive under Nero and alive under Domitian, here's some of the questions they wrestled with and struggled with, that we know they had debates over, because it's hard, it's nuanced, it's complicated. They wrestled with the questions: should Christians pay taxes? Should the Jewish people and the Christians who came from that pay taxes to an emperor who declared himself to be God, and use that money for wars against people they had no qualms with? Should Christians use Rome's money? Should they use the currency of Rome? From the Gospels, Jesus uses the example when he asks for a coin, it has Caesar's face. All the coins had that, and it said Lord and God on it. That was a problem. If you used that currency, was that saying that you were declaring Caesar was Lord and God? I just wanted a bag of Doritos, I'm not trying to get spiritual here. But they wrestled with those questions. Should Christians eat meat sacrificed to Caesar? A lot of times, the only meat in a Greek city was the ones that were sacrificed in pagan temples. And if you lived in a city that had a temple devoted to Caesar, that was the only meat you might have for that week or that month. And am I allowed to eat that because it's being offered to a living, breathing person that's saying he's God? Should Christians sell on feast days? If you live in one of those cities where there's a temple to Caesar, maybe you're not going to go yourself, but thousands of other people are. Is it wrong of you to set up a stall on the side of the road and make a little extra cash from those people who are going to the temple? I don't have the answers to any of these questions, but I'm saying these are the questions that the early church was wrestling with together. Different people had different answers. I'm saying it's important for us to begin asking these type of questions, or else we're just going to go wherever the two beasts tell us to. We're not even going to realize we're being led astray by the voice of the dragon. So I think the questions we need to begin asking ourselves: should we pledge the flag? We teach our children from as early as 4 or 5 years old to say the Pledge of Allegiance and memorize it. Is it not a kind of prayer? Should we sing the Star-Spangled Banner? Colin Kaepernick aside, why do we need to start sports games with a national recognition of our flag and our country? Should Christians join the military? Should we even vote? Again, I don't have the answers, but I'm saying if you've never asked those questions, you need to wrestle with them. Because if we're not critical thinkers, if we're not calculating the number of the beast and figuring out where's the beast in our day and age, the beast is going to lead us astray. He looks sometimes like a lamb, but can we tell the voice is a dragon? Okay? I'm not saying all of America is evil, but if it is the place of God in your life, then you need to get to the place where you put the lamb back on the throne, okay? This all comes at a time when we have an election in 2 days, and everybody's telling everybody what to think and who to vote for and what to do. And it's silly. If we get ourselves too far involved, we can sometimes miss the point of forgetting that all power is already under God, okay? So if you're going to the voting booth on Tuesday and you like Donald Trump is making a lot of promises right now that he is the only one who can protect your religious freedoms, that if Biden gets elected, there won't be God. He's doing a lot of boasting and putting himself in places he shouldn't be. Just make sure you're not voting for him because of those reasons, okay? Don't do it because you think he alone can protect your faith. Because Jesus says, if Biden wins and if we lose all religious liberty and Christian churches are getting closed and Christians are getting persecuted and killed, Jesus says, okay, the worst they can do is kill you, and look at me. You're going to be okay. But I hear the same argument from everyone saying to vote for Joe Biden. It's just the reverse. It's if Donald Trump gets elected, we're ruined. The least of these are going to get destroyed. It's the end of America, fascism, it will reign. And if that's the case, if the worst thing possible happens, then we know what our job is as the church. We're supposed to come alongside the least of these, stand in their place, die for them or die with them, okay? Whoever wins, the beast will tempt them and call them, and the dragon wants to offer their power to them. And if they take the dragon's power, we as the church, marked by the seal of the Lamb, need to call it out and be the people of God, not the people of the red, white, and blue. Okay? Tuesday is going to be a very interesting day. But whoever is in the White House in the next few months, God is on the throne.